Content note: the following video contains frank discussion of mental illness, as well as references to various forms of bigotry and mass violence. The Silver Samaritan! Greetings, aspiring heroes. I'm the Silver Samaritan, and welcome back once again to Superhero Survival Skills. In preparation for the section on mental health, I thought it would be appropriate to first summarize what mental illness is, what it isn't, and perhaps most importantly, what it will and won't make people do. Mental illness is basically any pathological pattern of thinking or behavior that negatively impacts the life of the sufferer and/or people around them. This can be anything ranging from social anxiety or chronic depression to addiction, psychotic episodes, or even long-term delusional states. Unlike the way mental illness is frequently presented in popular media by writers of, and this is important, fiction, it is not a one-size-fits-all explanation for violence or a descriptor for violent people. It is not the cause of racism, misogyny, homophobia, transphobia, or any other kind of prejudice. It may enable or exacerbate conditions that leave a person vulnerable to indoctrination in these prejudices, but it does not account for their existence. In other words, mental illness is different from being a violent, bigoted asshole. There's a lot of controversy around who gets called mentally ill. It's a handy go-to for labeling people who engage in antisocial behavior. And I don't mean antisocial as in antisocial personality disorder. I mean in the context where you have a pattern of bullying, disregarding, or endangering others. The mental illness label is often, especially, applied to supervillains with a penchant for violent crimes that directly affect large numbers of people. Who but a mentally unbalanced person would do such things? And it might seem like a bit of bad reasoning, but somehow this both removes any responsibility they may have for their actions, while simultaneously making them inherently bad and unworthy to remain free or even alive. The same goes for masked heroes. The first thing many of our enemies do is attempt to discredit us by calling us crazy or mentally ill. That doesn't hurt us as much as it hurts regular people who live with mental illness. We have masks. Regular people just have the consequences of marginalization. Now, I've famously gone up against some pretty, antisocial types, not to put too fine a point on it. For instance, Crucifer. While he's never been prosecuted for anything, as he's a trans-dimensional demi-demon and therefore laws just don't apply to him, he is responsible for the deaths of hundreds of people, directly and indirectly. Tankenstein, and you know he and I are cool, usually, but Tanky and I disagree on matters like property damage and whether or not preemptive violence is justified. You know his motto, he says it all the time, fight oppression at all times and in all forms, and, that sometimes means people get hurt, or buildings get demolished, or right-wing militias funded by foreign superpowers get massacred, or landlords mysteriously stop collecting rent. But Tanky isn't driven by mental illness. He's driven, as far as anyone can tell, by a singularly powerful political conviction. He's reasoned that violence is justified by his goals. The end justifies the means. And I'm not here to cast aspersions on that, but it's important to differentiate between that and, say, intermittent explosive disorder, which is real and has powerfully negative personal and legal consequences for people who live with it. So, a lot of ink and video have already been dedicated to theories about which mental illness drives the actions of Crank the Butcher. But honestly, I've met the guy a few times and he's, he's not well by any common definition, but his well-documented murder sprees, that's what they are, I won't sugarcoat it. They can't be explained purely by saying he's nuts. His targets are all well-established, organized criminals and corrupt officials. And I don't say that to defend him. I'm just tired of people saying he's psychotic or schizophrenic when he doesn't show any actual symptoms of either. Yes, he's a walking insult to masked vigilantes everywhere and a menace to society, but his actions, however reprehensible and deserving of censure, are, in the strictest sense of the word, reasonable. if you accept his premise that killers and their enablers deserve to die horribly. Although, if you think about it, that kind of means that he's also a bit of a hypocrite. Anyway, the point is, his actions are the result of bad reasoning and ideological inconsistency, not mental illness. Even I've been labeled as mentally ill because I work outside the law, wear a mask, and sometimes engage in violent suppression. Sometimes I have to hit people in defense of other people. Sometimes. That's one of the things I do. Not a lot, just, sometimes. Now, it might not come as a surprise to some of you to learn that I do live with mental illness, but not in the way you probably think. I would love to explain how and why, but can't really get into the details because it would compromise my secret identity. I can tell you this. I have, among other problems, something called complex PTSD. Briefly, and somewhat imprecisely, that is a near cousin of PTSD, resulting from prolonged, ongoing trauma. For example, maybe someone lives with CPTSD because they were raised in an abusive household, or were abused by a teacher or other authority figure for an extended period of time. That's one explanation. Another might be that a person grew up under an oppressive government, or even in a cult. The effects range from hypervigilance to suppression of emotion, dissociation, isolation, disruptive relationships, and consistently negative self-identity. Anyone looking to become a superhero might want to think about that. Did this affect my decision to put on a costume and fight injustice? Probably. What is anyone if not the sum of their experiences and the will to act on them? But is complex PTSD the reason I wear a mask and put my life at risk? It is not. I dress up like an idiot and throw myself into harm's way for the protection of others because I wish someone had done that for me when I needed them to. It may have even helped if somebody had just seen me suffering and said something. Some people think, well, everybody suffers. No reason to be a pussy about it. And sure, that's true. But my life, my memories, my experience, everything I've seen and lived through tells me that there's more to it than that. And the part of myself that I like the most, I don't know what to call it. Conscience doesn't really do it for me, but that part of me demands positive, direct action when I witness someone else's safety being threatened in any way. That means I can't spend a lot of time on Twitter, though, even if I pretty much have to use it. That is a horrible website, and it's allowed to be because, I don't know, apparently threatening people is constitutionally protected in some jurisdictions. I'm getting off track again. Look, if your reaction to a crime is to say that the perpetrator is mentally ill, then you don't understand crime or mental illness. People living with mental illness are far more likely to be the victims of crime than the perpetrators. Perpetrators might be desperate or misled, and that's why I don't bother with petty shit like shoplifting, and I don't like beating people up if I can avoid it. I try to focus on protecting people from harm. And obviously, violence and mental illness are not mutually exclusive. To understand the roots of violence in people who live with mental illness, consider our environment. How we are treated by law enforcement, employers, sometimes educators, and even family. I'm just saying, everybody has a breaking point, and the more our actions and society are geared towards meeting the material and emotional needs of everyone, not just those who can afford it, the better off we will all be. Speaking for myself, yeah, I don't deal with stress very well. But it's stresses everybody has, like, how will I pay my rent? Or what if I get fired? Or do people in my life actually like me, or am I the punk in an elaborate ruse? I don't channel that frustration and fear and paranoia into my mask life. That is my secret identity's problem. When I put on the suit, I am doing one thing and one thing only. Anything I can to make sure no one else has to be like me. Anyway, this got a bit personal. Next episode, I'll get into some of the methods I use to contain my crazy, which is basically just my short way of saying, making sure my problems don't become your problems if we meet in the street and our interests are at odds. If you want to like and subscribe, that would help me a lot, as would leaving any questions you have in the comments. And you can support my ongoing efforts to simultaneously protect the innocent and keep a roof over my head by heading over to my Patreon, see the link below, and sign up for, well, You know how Patreon works. It's not new. Anyway, thank you for listening. Once again, this is the Silver Samaritan saying good luck and stay safe.